Well, here we are, and it's a year later, a year after I got home from the hospital, and I've been anxious to share this story, and I wondered why I hadn't shared it earlier, but I just felt like a year would be a good opportunity to do that. And quite honestly, we've just seen God move and work in different ways over the course of the year. So there's some things in the story that wouldn't have been part of that story had we have shared it earlier. But this is the story of just my COVID journey and really my family and everything we went through during 2-3 weeks last October. And just want to share with you, yes, about what I went through and what we went through, but honestly, more importantly, want to share about what God did in our family. Obviously, the physical healing that He brought to me, but also what He did in my family and for my family. And this is really God's story, and we're just part of it, and grateful to be a part of it. So, October 2nd, or what was it, first or second, whatever that Friday was, whatever that Friday was, I'd started feeling a little bit bad and knew something wasn't right, and I remember just really tired and strained and not knowing what was going on, and just, man, this is not good. Thought I was getting like a sinus infection or something like that again, like usual. And so October 2nd, I knew something was definitely not right. And I actually called Josh Henry, and I said, hey, man, I need you to step in tomorrow, so that would have been Sunday, and lead for me. I don't feel right. I think I maybe had a little bit of a fever or something that day. And just, anyways, I knew I wasn't right yet. And of course, back then, you didn't, if you were showing any types of signs or symptoms of being sick, you didn't go out. You just stayed in until you were better. So that Sunday, I told him, I remember saying to him, hey, man, I need you to lead tomorrow. I'm not feeling real well. I should be good in a day or so. Well, little did we know that it wasn't going to be a day or so. But that Sunday, I remember watching the service, and I slept most of it and went back and watched it a little bit later, but missed the opportunity to go and get checked for COVID or tested for COVID. The clinic had closed, so I went in Monday. And got tested Monday, late Tuesday night. I think it was Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning. Got the results back, and yes, definitely tested positive for COVID. And I really wasn't feeling too bad. Just feeling tired and kind of achy and things like that. And then Trish said, well, let's go ahead and get you antibodies on Thursday. So she looked around and found a clinic, the closest clinic that did the antibodies, and that was in Bedford, right? Was it a Carilion clinic?
Yes.
Carilion clinic in Bedford. And so we went out Thursday, and that Thursday we got to the clinic, and still wasn't feeling real bad. I mean, I knew I was sick, but sat down. They did all the vitals and everything like that, and my oxygen was 86 or something like that. 86 or 87 or something. Anyways, it was below 90, and as soon as it's below 90, they are bound legally to send me or whoever to the hospital via ambulance. So we got in the ambulance and went to Carilion in Roanoke, which is about 30 to 45 minutes from where we were, and went through the emergency room. And I remember walking into the emergency room, as they call it, the COVID box. And it wasn't really all that big. It was kind of a makeshift room where they had different beds and chairs and just stuff everywhere, and just kind of like a makeshift room for folks that had COVID. And I sat in there for a little bit, and the doctor came in. You didn't go in there, did you, with that? Okay. So he told me, he said, hey, you can go home. We get you some medicine, you can go home, and you can kind of, fight this off at home. He didn't say you weren't too bad. He didn't say, like, you need to be admitted. It was just like, yeah, you're definitely sick, but you need, take it easy, all of that fun stuff. And he said you can either go home and fight it off at home, or you can get admitted. And I thought, I'll just go home. He didn't think it was too serious at the time. So I just, okay, let's go home. We'll fight it off at home. I'd rather be home, when I'm sick anyways, in my own bed and all that. So we went home Thursday night, and then Friday, I didn't really try to do anything Friday.
Well, the main reason we went home is so you could get the antibodies. Because if they admitted you, then you couldn't get the antibodies on Saturday. But they had made you an appointment on Thursday to get antibodies on Saturday.
Gotcha.
But the only way you could get the antibodies is if you went home. So we sent you home, and our goal was to get to his antibodies at 8 o'clock Saturday morning.
Okay.
So I hung out at Sam's all day long Thursday. When we took you to the clinic, all I remember is the nurse saying something about brain damage, and they took you in the ambulance and drove off. And I took a picture and sent it to the kids, and I said, "Start praying. I don't know what's going on, but I'm following the ambulance to Roanoke." And I hung out inside Sam's and in the parking lot. I was just kind of thinking we'd be hanging out at the hospital for a few days. I thought I'll go get a couple outfits from Sam's. I'll get some snacks. We'll hang out at the hospital.
Always shopping. Another excuse to shop. Husband's sick. Let's go shopping.
But we didn't know what was going to happen, so you chose to come home, and we were going to try to take care of you there so that you could get to the antibodies Saturday morning. And that was our goal, 8 o'clock Saturday morning for the antibodies.
Okay. I'd forgotten about that, or didn't really remember, or whatever. So that was Thursday. So we came home Thursday night. Friday, I slept most of the day. It really wasn't.
Slept, and Becky, his sister, was explaining to us about how COVID pneumonia sticks to your lungs, and the way it's just like sticky tar. And so we didn't want that happening, and the best way to keep that from happening is to walk, like to keep moving. So I remember you tried to go for a walk Friday evening, and I was nervous before, but I was really nervous after that walk because you couldn't really get back in the door. You couldn't breathe. And so
I don't remember that. I don't even remember going for the walk.
remember our walk, Lee and Racy actually was in our driveway when we got back from the walk, and I remember she was like, "Oh, look, he's doing so good. He was going for a walk." And I inside wanted to say to her, "No, he's not doing good." And but I didn't, and so we got you back inside, and I called Nancy, and I said, "Nancy, this isn't looking good." So she said, "Okay, I'm going to get you some oxygen." So Nancy showed up a few hours later with some oxygen. It was a 6-hour tank, but on low. If we needed to bump it up, it was only a 2 or 4 hour tank, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think if he bumped it up, it was 2 hours.
So the way he was using it, it was about a 4 hour tank because he had it bumped up a little bit, and he would kind of go on and off of it. And I remember just trying to get him through that night, and he woke, well, we didn't really sleep, but at one point he was like, "Okay, I need some more oxygen." So we were trying to put him on it a little bit and take him off of it a little bit. We were just trying to get to 8 o'clock that Saturday morning to get to the antibodies. If he was on oxygen, they would not allow him to have the antibodies, so we were just going to get him enough oxygen to get to the appointment. And I remember getting really scared about 2 in the morning. And at this point, Tim could not breathe anymore without the oxygen. And I told him, I said, "Listen, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. There was 2 hours left of oxygen in the tank." I said, "It takes us an hour to get back to the hospital. We're running out of time. We need to get to the hospital." He wasn't there yet. He was like, "Nope, I'm going to get to the appointment at 8 o'clock. I'm going to get the antibodies." And that was the goal. So I called his sister, and she didn't answer. So then I called her husband, Tony. He answered, and they were on speakerphone, and I just said, "He needs to go. He needs to go." And I remember Becky telling me, "He's got to get to that point. And once he's at that point where he knows he can't breathe," she said, "he'll get there. He'll get to the point where he can't breathe anymore, and he'll let you know." So she said, "Try to get him moving and see if that helps, because either that'll help or it will be worse." So she said, "Try to get him to go to the kitchen." So I said, "Tim, can you walk to the kitchen and back?" So he took the oxygen off. He walked to the kitchen. He came back. He sat on the bed, and he said, "Put the oxygen on and put it full blast." So we had it full blast. And I just sat there, and he looked at me. He said, "It's time." So I helped him get dressed.
Which I don't remember any of that. I remember. Yeah, sorry, Cal.
I was actually at the Ministry Land camping with the youth group, like some kids from the youth group. And I remember we were playing this game. It's like where you put nails in a big piece of wood, and you flip a hammer and so you can like put their nail in all the way. Pastor Josh actually played with us earlier that night. But anyways, we were just finished playing that game, and we were going to set up like our hammocks and stuff so we could go to sleep. And I look on Life 360, and Mom's leaving the house. And so I was like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. I was like, what's happening? But I didn't want to text her because I didn't want to worry y'all. But I didn't sleep at all that night because I knew we were on the way to the
Well, I
hospital.
had no idea that either. I don't know where I was. I knew.
Well, everyone was
I was
sleeping.
I was at school Thursday and Friday, so I really didn't see y'all, and I was just like, oh.
And you two were on the mission trip.
And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, Dad has COVID, but I thought it would just be like your COVID experience, so I wasn't really worried about it. Next thing I know, I wake up on Saturday morning, I had work, and Mom's like, Dad was in the hospital like 3 in the morning, and I was like, well, why am I just hearing about I was hearing about it at, I don't know, work, something. And I just thought, I didn't think it was that serious.
Well, none of us really knew how bad it was, and I just remember it was 2 o'clock in the morning. It was pitch black, pouring down rain. I am not. Let's just say I'm directionally challenged. So,
Very.
even with maps, my brain just doesn't listen to her. So I don't turn when she tells me to turn because I'm focused on something else. I don't know, but I remember that day. Not being nervous. The Lord gave me a peace and a calm. I never even thought about not being able to get there. I remember literally following the ambulance in, so I knew exactly where to pull in. I knew exactly where to go once we got there. But
The ambulance from Thursday.
right.
Yeah, which is
So-
why we went back to Carillion, because I'd just been there 2 days earlier.
Right.
They had all my information and everything like that, so we felt it was best to go back to Roanoke instead of going to Lynchburg.
So we start pulling out, and we're at a red light. And I remember Tim looked around and he said, "Just run the red light. Just go. You got to get me there." And so I thought, okay.
That's the
well,
only thing I remember of that night. I remember sitting at that intersection. I looked right, I looked left. I'm like, there's nobody coming. Just go. We've got to go.
So I knew at that point he was really struggling. He just kept saying, "I need to get there. I need help." And so we had the oxygen as high as it would go. And we got there. They actually let me go in with him. I was in just a room, an emergency room with them there. And the guy assured me, you know, if they admitted him or whatever, I was going to get to be with them. So that, to me, was comforting. I was taking pictures of everything and sending them to, I think, your sister. And the next thing I know, they came and got him and started taking him out. And I said, wait a second, they said I could go too. And the guy was like, well, they're not going to let you in, but you can try. So I said, I'm going as far as they'll let me, which is really a blessing, and I'll explain that later. So we go up, and they take him to ICU. They called it PICU, and for COVID PICU. And I went into the COVID unit, like walked in the doors with him, and the staff just followed him. And I just kept going quickly. I wasn't making eye contact with anyone, and some nurse starts yelling, "You can't be in here!" And so I just turned around, and the guy kind of played dumb. He was like, "Oh, I didn't know she couldn't come." And so she told me I had to leave, and I just remember at that moment, like, I didn't get to hug them. I didn't get to say bye, nothing. They just, like, literally just took them, and I was just standing there. They took me the opposite way. And so I just was kind of left standing there outside of the PICU doors. And I said, I'm not going to leave here till I get some information. Can a nurse, can a doctor come explain to me what's going on? I don't know anything that's going on. They were just telling me I had to leave and go home. And they would call me later. And I just said, no, I'm not going to leave till y'all tell me what's going on. And so they took me to, I said, where can I go until someone can come talk to me? So they said, well, we have this little waiting room. You can come hang out in the waiting room. So I just remember walking around that waiting room and just praying and just praying. And I still didn't know the magnitude. Finally, a nurse came out and talked to me, 2 of them, but one was talking to me, and she said, I don't remember exactly what she started telling me, but I just remember hearing, I said, I just remember saying, when can I see him? And she said, well, on day 25. And I said, wait, what? I said, he's still going to be in here in 25 days. And she said, well, I don't know if he's going to be. She said, but you won't be able to see him again in the hospital unless he's been in here for 25 days. And at 25 days, then they can move him to another unit if he's well enough, and then you'll be able to see him then. And I remember just being blown away, like 25 days. And I said, well, is he going to be okay? And then I started realizing, like, this is so serious. And they said, well, right now they have him on the lease. We haven't really checked him out. He just walked in, but rolled in, but they have him on the least level of oxygen. They said there's several different oxygens they can put him on, and there was lots of different things they could do for him, so there was no need to worry. And at that point, that was Saturday morning. So at that point, that was probably like 8 a.m. Saturday morning.
So was that the day? Was I in a bed or what?
You were in the bed. They wheeled you from the emergency room.
Because I do remember sitting. I went back into that room that I was in on Thursday, and there was nobody in there. It was just me. And they said, "All right, a doctor will be with you shortly." And then 4 people walked in, and the doctor, he kind of knelt down in front of me and said, "Hey man, you're pretty sick." He goes, "We need to admit you right now. Your levels and all of everything are pretty low." So he said, "You're not doing really well. How do you feel?" "Not really well." So he said, "All right, man. Well, we're gonna go ahead and admit you, okay?" And that's all I remember at that point.
You were in the COVID box. I couldn't go to the COVID box. You were by the time I dropped you off at like 3 o'clock Saturday morning, and the time they put you into a room in the emergency room was less than 30 minutes. So I wasn't able to be with you in the COVID box, but I was able to be with you in the emergency room in the room. So I stayed with you from about 3:30 to 8 o'clock that morning when they moved you to PICU.
See, I thought I went right to ICU. I don't remember. I don't remember
No,
doing that
well,
that first one.
I remember when he moved to ICU because, like the next Sunday, it was the King's Dominion trip with Chick-fil-A. So I had left church. I had gone to church that morning, and they had prayed with us.
I'll tell you when we moved to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was Saturday morning, and then I remember it was, I took a little notes, and I didn't journal really well while he was in the hospital. I wish I would have journaled more. I really just took details and facts and just jotted them down really quick. So I have on here that on Sunday, October 10th, that's when they moved him to a lot of oxygen. And I just remember that the nurse called and said he was having high anxiety. That was
I don't remember
Sunday
that.
morning.
Well,
at
I remember
1:30.
why I had high anxiety, but I don't remember having it like all the time.
Which they said was completely normal because he couldn't breathe. They were like, you can't breathe. I mean, that causes anyone anxiety. Plus everything that he was hooked up to and all the beeping, and they just kept telling him he had to be on his belly, and he didn't really know what was going on. But I remember they called me, and the nurse said, this was Sunday, so this was within 24 hours of him being in PCU, of me taking him up there, the nurse called and said, I just want to let you know that we've tried to put a BiPAP on your husband. And she said, and I didn't know what that was at the time, and she said, it's a form of intubation, and she said, but he is not tolerating it. And she said, because of that,
I'm surprised there.
she said, because of that, we are going to have to move him to ICU. And so the next step is intubation. And she said, we will try the BiPAP one more time when he's in ICU. And if he cannot tolerate the BiPAP, then we will have to intubate. So she said, we're not moving him to ICU because we are intubating right now. She said, we're moving him to ICU because that's the next step. So in case we need to intubate.
And the BiPAP is like a big CPAP, which I have them, but I get claustrophobic. So even the one I have at home, it's a struggle for me to put that one on any amount of time. So this BiPAP, you could hear, like, it had a big old headband thing on it, and then it would come down over you, and you could hear the air just like gushing out of this thing. And I'm thinking, I remember distinctly telling the nurse, I said, listen, I said, I struggle with the CPAP at home. I said, but if you're saying this is going to help me, then I'll give it a shot. I said, but I really don't feel good about this. I said, because I get claustrophobic, so forth, so on. She said, all right, Mr. Tim, we'll give it a shot. So she puts this thing on over my head, brings that mask down, and no sooner as she let go than I just pulled it right back off. I said, nope, this is not going to happen. Because it was just crazy, the amount of like air, and I guess it was heated and ventilated and all this or whatever, I don't know. And I'm like, that is not happening. And it was just like gushing on your face, and I could not tolerate it. It was not fun.
So
And that was my high anxiety.
So at 5:30, I remember they called with an update, 5:30 Sunday night, and they said yes, they had moved him to oxygen, and or they moved him to ICU, and that he was on the highest amount of oxygen. And I remember, how did we get there so fast? I just seen him, the day before, but they moved him there. And
Which
they
is
had
what,
them-
100%? It's what, 60 liters?
So 65 liters of high flow, heated high flow oxygen at 100%. So they had him maxed out as much as he could go on oxygen, the highest level of oxygen. And the BiPAP intubation wasn't working, so they were moving him to ICU to intubate in case they needed to intubate.
Put me on the ventilator,
And
right? Yeah.
Yes. And so I remember I called Becky. I remember, and she said, I'm already on the way. Like, she knew once they called and said they were moving him to ICU. So Tony watched all the kids. She hopped in the car and made her way there to help, to be with us, but also to help her mom, because her mom had cancer, had COVID at the time. Had COVID at the time as well. And so I was running back and forth giving her breathing treatments and things. So she made her way up to help. And that's when I had told the rest of the kids what was going on, but Kayla was on a trip with her Chick-fil-A team.
I had told you if something were to happen, like, tell me right away. Or, like, be for real with me. And I remember I was at Cadence Dominion and you kept texting me, like, what are you doing? When are you going to be home? So I was like, well, either he's dead or, like, he's not okay.
Right to the worst case scenario.
So then,
Well, I'm your
I
daughter.
I was at the Burley's house. We were playing hide and go seek and stuff, and they were all trying to cheer me up. So they're just trying to keep my mind off it or whatever. And so Mom knew that, like, I was always with these friends. It didn't matter if she called me or anything. So she called me crying and said they can't put him on a ventilator. Like, he might not ever come off of it. Blah blah blah. So then Kayla starts texting me.
No,
and
it was
like,
a group chat. Mama texted us in a group chat.
and Mom would not tell Kayla what was going
So
on
I
because
started texting.
because she didn't want to mess up her trip. So Kayla starts texting me, tell me what's going on right this second. Kelly, this is not funny. You better tell me what's going on. So I was texting Mom, and Mom was like, well, should I just tell her? I said, no, it's okay, I'll tell her. So
Kelly called me.
yeah, I called her and told her. I guess that was it.
Well, I just remember, like, we weren't gonna get back till late, and because it was 2 hours away. So by the time I got home, Aunt Becky was about there.
Becky got there at 2 o'clock in the morning Monday morning.
I think I got there like 1:30.
And so Aunt Becky got there about 2 in the morning, and then that next Monday morning, they didn't really call and give us many updates. They would call like around noon every day and give us one update a day. The nurse did. The doctor didn't call very often. But I remember I always called. They told me if I wanted to call, I could try to call around 9, because that was kind of when the nurses had changed shifts. And I remember for me, I needed to know if he was breathing. Like, I needed to know in the morning if he was still breathing or not. But so sometimes we would get an answer, and sometimes they would say we need to call you back. But I have on here at 10:30 Monday morning, we had gotten an update that there was no improvement, but he was not intubated as of yet. So remember, we had that Monday morning.
No, I do not remember that.
And then I remember we all sat with Becky and
That
just
Monday
kind of
morning.
talked about everything. And
I wasn't there though, right?
No, you
I don't remember. And
Becky's an RN, registered nurse, so she knows all terminology, medications, everything, all of that was going on. So she was incredibly helpful.
yes,
At that point when, like, we saw Aunt Becky, I still didn't really get that it was like that serious until I saw Aunt Becky. And then when she was a mess, when she was crying and praying and just a mess, then I was like, I mean, because you cry a lot. Like, that was well, it's normal for her to cry because her husband's in the hospital. But when I saw Aunt Becky like that, I was like, well, she sees this all the time, and if she's like this, then it's got to be bad.
See, I, at the time, am the type of person to avoid my problems. I just avoid them. Well, Mom doesn't remember this, and I know she didn't mean it and whatever, but I think I told her this and you said you didn't remember it. But I was really sick before I went to Pittsburgh,
I
before
know this is coming.
Dad got sick. And so Mom told me, you gave him COVID, like, blah, blah, blah. And she, like, it wasn't, like, it was just, she thought that I had given him COVID. She wasn't saying this is your fault or anything like that. But I was like, oh my goodness, what if I kill Dad? So I couldn't be home. Like, I just couldn't be home. Kayla was the complete opposite. She just couldn't leave home. Like she had to be home the whole time. I'm the type of person that just doesn't like to be around it. So honestly, while all this was happening, I barely saw Aunt Becky while she was here. Like I was barely home. Like I just couldn't be home because I didn't want to think about it because it was just too overwhelming to think about everything that was going on. So I really didn't know much of what was happening.
You did end up going back home with her later, though.
Okay,
Yeah.
I know this is kind of backtracking, but wait, my dreams about Dad. You never said that.
Could I take a little break? My back is killing me. Oh my gosh.
What in the world?
Yeah, I'm
Sit
just
up
like,
straight,
I'm
buddy.
like
Sit up
slouching the whole
straight.
time. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
You're fine. You can slouch a little bit if you need to.
Just slouch, be normal if you need
Well,
it.
did I say that part?
So sometimes I have to like stretch my legs like that.
You're fine.
Why were you crying, Buzz?
Tell what,
I
Kayla?
completely forgot about that.
About
When you
you.
got sick, I thought that it was because I was gonna kill Dad because I was having dreams about you dying
Oh,
for
brother.
like 2 weeks. Remember that? And I told you and Mom in the kitchen, and a week later you got COVID.
Oh, gee. It's great. My kids are out for me. Well, let's keep moving.
Okay, so on October 11th, I have written down at 11:30 a.m. We FaceTime with Tim, and I remember he was supposed to be singing in a wedding that weekend, and he was so worried about that wedding, and he was texting Wendy, and I remember I have written down on here that we are worried about his life and is he going to live, and he's saying, can you please text Wendy and let her know to tell them I can't sing in that wedding. I can't sing in that wedding. He was so concerned about not being able to sing in the wedding. And at that point, it was all four of us. It was all four of us, Aunt Becky and Dad, and we all FaceTimed together and we all prayed. I just remember, and I wrote that down, that we all prayed with you, and then we all sat on the couch and discussed everything, and we all cried together.
I mean, I'm sure I looked like a mess and probably felt like a mess, but it didn't really, like I didn't know. I didn't know I was that bad. Now you say that the nurses told me that I was really as bad as I was and I needed to do X, Y, and Z, but I never felt that. Like I never felt any pain. I never felt any struggle. I mean, maybe it's the wonders of, modern medicine, but like I never felt like I was going to die. It was always like I'm where I need to be, I'm getting the medication I need, and I've got the people around me that I got around me, both in the hospital and outside the hospital. So it was never that bad for me. It literally or physically, I just never struggled that I could tell or that I remember.
And that's what I have written down after we FaceTime, that he doesn't understand how sick he was. And I was just really struggling with the suffering that he was going through. He might not remember it, but he was really having a hard time and just struggling, feeling horribly sick. And I know you don't remember, and I remember he looked at me and said, I'm just so tired. I'm just so tired. And I thought he was telling me, like, I'm just done.
I remember that. I remember looking at that. I went, I'm just so tired. Like, and it wasn't tired of, like, I'm tired of fighting, because I didn't really feel like I was fighting. I was just tired. I just wanted to sleep.
At
I
that
was just
point,
tired.
Mom went wife mode and got really scared. And so she told us to start texting you, and we were texting
Yeah.
you, can't wait till you come home, can't wait, blah, blah, blah. You weren't making sense.
It
You
was
were
like
saying you were going to be
gibberish.
home in 2 days. And
Yeah.
we're like, he
That's
doesn't
what I
have
thought.
any idea what he's saying.
That was my plan.
So, and then this was still on Monday, so that was 11:30 a.m. And then I have written down at 4:30 Monday night, Shirley went to get her antibodies. So Becky took Shirley, Tim's mom, to get her antibodies. And I think they went to Roanoke, so they were gone for quite a bit. And then on October 11th, that night at 5:30, normally when the doctor would call or something, or the nurse, any kind of updates, I would always have Becky in the room, and I would put her on speakerphone. I let her make all the medical decisions on what to do for Tim, because I didn't know, and I 100% trusted her. And I remember one time the doctor called me, and she was with her mom, and I said, can you please call this number and speak with his sister? Because I wanted her to talk to the doctor, and she wasn't with me, because I didn't know for sure what to tell him, what we wanted done. It was just really hard not being there. And so at 5:30, October 11th, that Monday night, the nurse called and gave us an update. And she said that Tim was still on heated high flow. They did try the BiPAP again, and he just couldn't handle it. He couldn't tolerate it.
Nope.
So I remember her telling me that he was just really pushing where they wanted to see his numbers. And so that he was maxed out on his heated high flow, and that they were just really praying. We just were really praying that he was going to start turning a corner. And I remember and just really, really praying that he didn't have to be intubated. And I remember her telling me, like, he's COVID ICU sick. And I'm like, okay. And so that was at 5:30 when she originally called, and we talked for a little while. And then at 6:14 that same night, she called me back, and she said, I want you to realize how sick he was. She said, I think when we were talking before, you didn't quite get it. So she said, I want you to understand. And I said, okay. And so I remember I went into my room and closed the door. The boys were home. And she was just telling me, he's really, really sick. She said, I've worked on this unit for 7 months, and I've seen people not as sick as him, and they didn't make it through the night. And so she said, I want you to realize how sick he is. And she said, if there's something you need to say to him, something you need to tell him, she said, now's the time. Now's the time you need to talk to him. And at that point, he really wasn't making a whole lot of sense because he just had so
Maybe
much
to you.
medicine in him.
I felt great.
And there was nothing I could tell him. I knew where he was going if he were to pass away. But I also remember that I remember asking her, I knew if the Lord was going to heal him, he was going to heal him. Like, I knew if he wanted to, if he chose to heal him here on heaven, or maybe he was going to heal him here on earth. I'm totally messing this up.
You're fine, baby. You're
You're right.
fine.
Anyways, I knew the Lord could do whatever he was going to do, but I wanted to know what she thought, like medically. So I said, well, are you telling me to give up hope? And I remember her asking her, I said, are you telling me there's no hope? And she said, well, never give up hope. She said, but if there's something you need from him or something you need to tell him, she said, you need to do that right now. And so
you can.
in my head, I was just thinking logically, and I thought, I need the bank account information.
Mom!
Because he handles all the bank account, and like he handles all the money, does all the banking, and I remember thinking, I need to know how to get into our bank account. Like, I need the password, and but that's what was in my head. Obviously not at first, but that's the only thing I could think of that I needed to get from him. But the Lord provided so many things for us along the way, and I forgot to say on Sunday night was Pastor Appreciation, where they were having a big dinner for all the pastors and their wives, and since we couldn't be there, all the pastors' wives left that dinner, and they came to my house, and they prayed on my front porch, and so that was a neat experience. Sorry, so hopping back to Monday, when I got that phone call, the second phone call, because the nurse was realizing, like, she doesn't understand how sick he is. When I got that phone call, it was so neat how the Lord provided in so many different ways. But he provided a friend to be there for me. At that time, we were still quarantined. The girls were not quarantined because they were in the basement.
But she came down to the basement to tell us.
But
the nurse had just called.
The-
What she said.
Yeah, so the boys and I were still quarantined at that time, and so no one could come in. But when I got off the phone and came out of the room, Jamie was there. And Cooper, you can tell about that.
So I remember, like, I was in my room playing video games, and so I just hear the doorbell ring, so I go to see who it was. And it was Miss
So
Jamie.
you're playing, yeah, the doorbell rings and mom's on the phone, right?
Yeah.
Is that what? Okay.
I walk by, just hear mom crying, I'm like, just walk by. And so Miss Jamie with the pizza, so I'm like, so I took the pizza. Well, I open the door. She walks in. She puts it on the counter. She says, "Is your mom okay? How's she doing?" I said, "I don't know how she's doing, but she's in her room right now on the phone, talking to the nurse, and I don't think it's going very well." So he said, "Okay, I'll just be on the porch. Just tell her I'll be on the porch waiting for her." So So I just go in there and tell Mom, Miss James, just waiting for it.
You're all right, buddy. You're doing great.
And so it was neat how the Lord provided. So Jamie said, I'm not going to go anywhere. She told him, she said, I'll stay right here until your mom gets off the phone with the nurse. So when I got off the phone, I walked out. Hayden and Cooper were in the kitchen. And so Jamie sat on the porch on one corner and I sat on the other corner because we were still quarantined. And it was neat how the Lord provided her for me. And we talked, we prayed, and I said, I need to, this was silly, I said, but I need to know our password to the bank account. I said, but I don't want to ask him for it and him think I'm asking because I think he's dying.
Like I'd have known it anyway.
I didn't want to know. I said, I needed it worded. So she helped me word it to where it was just like, hey, I'm going to take care of the bills while you're in the hospital. You want to give me the password or whatever. So he gave me all the information. And then I just remember that night when the nurse called to tell me again how sick he was, she said his best chance of survival is that he needs to lay on his belly and prone. So she said our goal is to get him to prone for 16 hours tomorrow.
Not gonna happen.
16 hours. I don't think I've ever done anything for 16 hours.
She said if he doesn't,
golf.
then we'll innovate. She said we'll innovate, flip him over, and he'll stay there. He'll stay on his belly. So I remember thinking, at this time, Becky's still in Roanoke with her mom getting antibodies. And I remember Jamie was like, hey, you can make a poster board. And when he's laying on his belly, he can just like look at the poster board to remember what he's fighting for. And that's what I kept thinking, like, I've got to get something to him tonight to remind him what he's fighting for.
Can
Can we say something?
So basically, Mom texts us and she goes, you need to text Dad right now and tell him to prone. Tell him to prone and that
We
you
were
love him
still-
and you need to tell him to do it for you.
We were still
So-
quarantined until this night.
So anyway, so we all text Dad telling him to prone. We were like, what in the world is proning? Lay on his belly. Tell him to lay on his belly. So then Mom rushes downstairs. She goes, come on, girls, we need to go. Find all these pictures of Dad. Find pictures of Dad. We need to get a poster board. We need to do this right now. Like, we're getting in the car. We're doing it right now. And so I think she already had a poster board or something.
Jamie went down all the supplies and got
And
it to us.
we all wrote on it and stuff.
And you already had a picture of the 4 kids.
And then we went to go to CVS to minute print some more pictures. And I remember Mom needed gas for the van, and she was scrambling, trying to get it all done because she was like, we're leaving right now. And we pull into the...
we don't do this, he is gonna die. He needs to know what he's fighting for.
You can tell who's the dramatic one in the family.
So we pull into the gas station, and Mom goes, all right. She goes, get all the pictures on it right now. And me and Kayla are like, where, Mom?
Right now?
Where are we supposed to do it at? So we
Use the lights in the hood of the
we
car.
put it on the hood of the car, and we're just doing it at the gas station. And so then we get there,
And this is where it's prevalent to know that the nurse told me in the elevator, if you need to bring something to him while he's here, do not drop it off at the information desk. He'll never get it. She
Yeah.
said, you come back here. She
So-
said, don't make eye contact with the desk. Keep walking and bring it here.
And we were
So,
in what, pajamas?
we were literally pajamas. Like, we got out of bed and just went. And I remember Mom looks at us in the car before we get out, or as we're walking in or something, and she looks at us and she goes, I know where I'm going. She goes, y'all need to look like you know where you're going to. She goes, walk in, don't look at anybody, just follow me and act like you know what you're doing.
We're gonna get on the elevator.
So we did. We went right up to the door of the unit, and the nurse came out and grabbed it for us, and then we stayed there and prayed for a little while.
Yep. Right outside his unit. I mean, he was right in the doors. And I was so thankful that I did get to go up that first day and see where he was, and that the nurse told me that, because we did bypass the information desk because they were like, ladies, and we just kept walking and made it up there. Dropped off the poster.
That night, I hadn't really seen like any of my friends. I don't know why I'm already crying. But one of my friends, Riley, she was like, I don't want you to be alone tonight. She knew.
We're not there yet.
I thought we were already there.
No, Kayla.
Yes, we are. It was that night. So after we left the hospital.
So October 12th.
No, not yet.
At 8:20 in the morning, we were still waiting for an update, and I just remember thinking, is Tim still breathing? This is really hard. At 9:30 that morning,
Mom, it was that night.
So at 9:30 that morning, we got another update that there was no change with him. There was a slight improvement because of adding nitrate. So we did not want him to be intubated, so they added nitrate to his nitric. Okay, so they added that, and they had him on the most nitric possible, and they added that with the highest heated high flow, and he kind of just sat there for a while. And remember, he was still needing to prone. They kept telling me he's got to prone, he's got to prone. So I remember at 9:50 in the morning, he finally texted me, and then that's when October 12th.
Isn't that when I texted you like I had proned?
Yes, and it was like 3 minutes.
I was so happy. I proned today. Let her know, and she's like, "Oh, that's great. For how long? 10 minutes." Well, they have this big battery thing sitting right here because I'm hooked up to all like electrodes everywhere, and my arms are full of cables and all and everything, and all these electrodes and stuff. And this big battery right here, which they didn't tell me I could take out. So I'm trying to lay on my belly. This thing's jabbing me in the chest. I got wires wrapped around everywhere. I'm like, this is brutal. Not happening.
So this is what I have about the lion. You want to talk about that?
You can talk about the song first.
Okay. So, as we were saying, the Lord was giving us just little things along the way. And I remember hearing a podcast ahead of time from Sadie Robertson, and it was about how when she was praying that when her baby was born, that the Lord would give her baby this lion lungs. And I don't know why, but I just kept thinking about that for him, and I was like, I didn't really listen a lot to the podcast, so I thought I'm going to go back, find the podcast, and find the song that she posted, and the Lord just kept bringing that to my mind. It was like a month earlier that I had listened to that. So I went back and I heard that song, and the name of it was Gratitude by Brandon Lake, and it was the first time I'd listened to it, and I just started praying that song over Tim, and I think I put it on Facebook at that time. I wasn't, I don't think I posted exactly how sick Tim was because I didn't know what he was seeing, and I didn't want him to realize how sick he was. But I remember I posted that song, and I sent it to the whole family, and I said, let's start praying for Dad in this way. And yes, that his lungs would heal and he would have that roar of a lion in him, but also I didn't know where he was spiritually. Like, I was hoping that he was praising the Lord, but that's what that song says, get up and praise the Lord. And that's what I wanted for him, no matter what he was going through, no matter what was happening at that point. I was just hoping and praying that he was praising the Lord.
Just to be clear, my wife knows spiritually where I'm at. I am safe and secure in my salvation. I would have been in heaven.
Yes, I know that too. I just mean, like, you don't know, like, is he sad? Is he thinking, why is the Lord making me go through this? Or is he thinking, is he praising the Lord at that moment?
He was thinking, man, I'll be out of here in 2 days.
Yeah. So I posted that song on Facebook, and at 3:06 p.m., my friend Lori from Florida texted me and said, hey, I just saw your post on Facebook. That's pretty cool because I have been praying. As soon as I heard about Tim getting sick on Friday night, I went to a concert and heard that song in person, and she said her daughter Lindsay and her had been praying over that same song. And her words were, I think it's really cool that the Lord gave us the same song for Tim and the same prayer for Tim. And then
Aunt Becky heard it too, right?
yeah.
So the night we went to the hospital and dropped off the poster, my friend Riley was texting me. I hadn't really seen any of my friends since that happened. And she was like, I don't want you to be alone tonight. So she was like, just come over when you get home. And I was like, okay. And she was asking me if I wanted anything chocolate usually, but I said no. And so her boyfriend works at Walgreens, and so she went to Walgreens. And anyway, even though I said I didn't want anything, and she was looking for something for us. And when I showed up, she said, okay, well, I got you something. And I was like, I told you, like, I don't want to eat anything. I'm not hungry. So we walk upstairs, and she opens the door, and it was a stuffed animal. And it was a lion. And I'm like, immediately, like, I was just, like, bawling. And I was like, I was just saying over and over, how did you know? How did you know? And she was like, no, what? And I told her about the song. And I was like, why in the world would you get me a lion? Why would you get me a lion? And there was actually 2 to choose from, a lion, a giraffe, and I was like, well, I'm obviously taking the lion. She was like, well, I don't know which one you'd want, and I was like, well, I told her, I was like, well, this is crazy. I was like over and over, how did you know, and she was like, I didn't, and anyway, that was a big deal.
Yep. And then Becky's friend sent her that song too. Becky, one of her friends just sent, I guess her husband had gone through the same thing maybe the year before or something, and she Facebook messaged that song to Becky as well. And so I thought that was really cool that the Lord was giving us all the same song. And I just remember I was texting with my friends telling them, and they were like, okay, y'all got to get lion tattoos. So we started joking about that and
going to get mine
sending
soon.
pictures. But I just remember the Lord showing us that night that He was in the details, and that He loves us so much that He was going to speak to us through this, just letting us know He cared, and He was comforting us through the details, through the little details that He was giving us. And we joked us that we're going to blast that song on Tim's first Sunday back. I also have on my notes, this was on Monday, that he wasn't texting at all. I had not heard from him in 24 hours, so I've written down that I was praying that it was because he was proning. And in my head I thought he was, but apparently he wasn't. So, at 3 p.m., just have written down that praying he's turning a corner, claiming and believing this today. I found out at that time at 3 p.m. that they were going to have a prayer service for Tim, not only Tim, but also for other people that were struggling in our church that had COVID, just other people in the community that had COVID, but also a big part of that was praying for Tim as well. And so I remember I texted Jamie, because her husband Chaz was the one that was kind of heading it up, I think, at that time. Mm-hmm. And so I texted Jamie and I said, hey, Jamie, I know we're still quarantined. The girls weren't, but we were. And I said, hey, because that's when you had to be quarantined forever at that point. And I just remember saying, hey, can we go? Can we go and just sit in the van just so we could be a part of that? And so she said, yeah, go and everyone will surround your van and pray for Tim while you're there in the parking lot.
It was weird surrounding my own van. Like I was outside and you were inside.
Well, I remember I had tried to go to work, and I usually try to keep my mind off stuff. And I was outside expediting, and I hadn't said anything. I hadn't smiled, and people know that. So my boss, Scott, which is also friends with Dad, looked me through the window and was like, Kayla, what's wrong? You haven't said anything to me yet. And he was running shift, and I was quiet for a second, and he looked at me, and I was like, my dad's in the hospital, and he's not okay. And so, he walked away. He didn't know what to do.
He just walked away?
Yes, he walked away. And, he went and got Miss Yennel.
Oh, Scotty Pippen.
And, Carrie Wright was actually there that day. She just happened to be there. And I wasn't even talking to Mom. I wasn't even talking to you about how I felt about anything. And she wasn't working. I don't know why she was there. And they went ahead. Miss Yannel came outside and told me to just go on break. So I went inside and I told her that I would probably be okay, but I just needed a minute. And so I got my food and I went outside and I talked with Carrie. And I just remember that day, if he doesn't make it, who am I gonna dance with at my wedding? And it was just all hitting me that day. I needed him to be okay. It had all come up on my 1 year goes, crying in the bathroom. I just showed Mom a couple days ago, crying in the Chick-fil-A bathroom, and there were tears on the floor, and it was just, I just remember that day being really hard, because usually I can just work and I'll be fine. But I went to the bathroom and I was getting ready to clock in, and another shift lead came in and she was like, Kayla, and I walked out and she's like, you're going home, go home with your family. And I was like, okay.
I remember in the meantime, I had no idea Kayla went home. No idea. Well, I don't like being home and around, I like being there to comfort
People?
my family, but I don't, but I didn't like being around it all the time. I just needed to get out. I didn't like to think about it all the time. But I still wanted to do something for them and to let them know that I still care. So I went to Joe Bean's and I got Kayla's favorite drink. She talks about it all the time. Oh, I love that drink. I love that drink. At the time she had no money, so I was like, I'll go get her a drink. So
She still has no money.
So I got her favorite drink, and Riley. Riley was also at Chick-fil-A, so I got Riley one too, and to say thank you because she also got me a line too. And I walk in and I'm like looking around, and I'm like, where's Kayla? And I was like, oh no, where's Kayla? And Miss Carrie comes up to me and she goes, what are you doing here, Kelly? And I was like, I'm bringing a drink to Kayla. She goes, oh, she went home like an hour ago. And I was like, what in the world? But I was gonna say something. That's fine.
That's her.
So for the prayer service, the girls were able to go inside, and I don't know what
So it
happened.
was Tuesday
inside.
night, right? Tuesday night was the prayer
Yeah.
service. Yeah.
So, that was they had the prayer service inside. So we were just in the parking lot waiting for them to come out. But they, I guess I don't know if y'all want to talk about what happened inside the church or whatever. But I guess they just
I don't really
prayed.
remember.
It wasn't.
And then-
it wasn't much. Like they prayed. They talked to us a little bit, like asked how he was doing, and then we just went right outside.
It was
Okay.
mostly people praying separately in their own groups
Yeah.
for Dad.
Like we prayed with like
With our friends.
our youth group.
Yeah.
Friends.
Right. And then, and again, they weren't just praying for Tim; they were praying for other people as well. And then they came out and surrounded our van. And I remember they all prayed. There were lots of people there, and I remember Josh coming up to the window. Pastor Josh came to the window and was talking to me. And I just remember feeling like unworthy, maybe like just it was weird to be on the other side of just allowing people to. There were so many people, and so many people reached out to us, and they were bringing meals, and they were calling and praying for us and lifting us up and checking on us, and it was hard for me to be receiving that. And I remember Josh was just like, you know, Tim and your family have served the Lord, and right now this is your time. Tim has been so faithful to serve the Lord, and basically reaping what he sowed. And right now, it's your time for people to love on you, and you just have to let them. And I remember I needed to hear that, so we did. And what was so neat and so I just will never forget that service or the prayer time. It was so sweet. Everyone was praying and taking turns, and then I remember Pastor Josh said, I mean, there must have been 30 people out there, I'm not really sure, but he said, let's just all vocally lift up your prayer to the Lord out loud, but everyone at the same time. And I remember that was really, really neat. It was the boys, Becky, and myself were all in the car, and Tim's mom was still at home, so I remember us thinking we couldn't be there for long because we needed to get back so Becky could take care of Tim's mom. But at that time, everyone just lifted up their prayer at the exact same time. And it was so neat sitting there and hearing, 30, 40 different voices just lifting up a prayer to the Father at the exact same time. I will never forget that moment. It was
And then
powerful.
we started singing.
Yeah, we sang
Oh, I don't even
songs.
remember that.
Yeah,
Wendy
we sang
and-
songs.
Wendy
and
Wendy
I
and
think-
Carrie
Yeah, I
started
remember
it.
that.
And Jamie.
Because they were like
Started
at the front.
You don't remember
of the van.
that?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I was crying a
We
lot
sang-
in the
we
car.
Same
we
Blessed
sang-
Assurance,
We
right?
sang Blessed Assurance and I think another one.
Cornerstone.
I don't remember.
About God's power and His presence and His purpose through this whole time. Oh Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made. Come on now. I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe display. Come on. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Sing it out. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art.
So,
Like,
and
looking to
I
you.
just remember thinking that night, the Lord laying on my heart for me to be who I am, to not be how I feel, but to remember that I was a child of God and that I needed to remember that other people were watching how I steward this hard time well. And so I just kept praying, Lord, help me to handle this. Give me your strength and help me to be a good steward of this part of my story. And so that's the Lord gave me. Although I was scared and I didn't know what was going to happen, I didn't know how the Lord was going to hold the future. I cannot tell you how much strength. I've never felt the strength of the Lord. He truly showed me that when we are weak, He is strong. And there were not times that, of course there were times that I was broken and I was literally laying on my stomach praying out to God, please don't take him, please don't take him. But at the same time, I had a peace knowing that if He did take him, that we were going to be okay, that the Lord was going to take care of us. And He really gave us strength. And I remember my prayer, and I started praying that then was, because again, like I said, I just didn't know. I knew where He was physically. I knew mentally He wasn't quite all there. But I didn't, since I wasn't with Him, I didn't know exactly what state of mind He was at that time. Was He praising the Lord for this? Or I just didn't know where He was, and I just kept praying, Lord, overwhelm him with your presence. And I just kept praying that His Spirit would be so thick in that room and so heavy in His room that He would just feel the Lord like He has never felt before. And that was my prayer, that He just would be overwhelmed by Lord's presence. And so what I thought was pretty cool was when I sent all these pictures to Tim, his exact words to me were, Trish, I'm so overwhelmed. And so then again, the Lord was showing me exactly what I was praying for was happening. So then Tuesday, I have at 5:30 p.m. we got another update that God was moving and working, because He had a very slight improvement today. And they told me He was moving in the right direction. And
That was on Tuesday?
Tuesday?
That was
Before
at-
the prayer?
Before
that was at Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. So, and at 8:45 p.m. is actually when we went to the church.
Okay.
So, then on Wednesday at 10:30 in the morning, we got another update that there was another slight improvement. And the nurse told me that he was feeling really crummy. And I remember her telling me that it was like pouring, he was on 65 liters of heated high flow. And they said it's just like a water hose just pouring down your nose. And they were like, they told me it was really bad. That what he was going through was really, really bad. And he was feeling really bad.
So up to that point, I don't remember any of that. Like, I remember Trish sending me pictures or texts of and videos, pictures and videos of the Tuesday night prayer. Anything other than that, I really don't remember. I remember little moments here and there, but everything's just kind of blurry or non-existent up to that point. And I don't remember feeling any, like, to hear Trish say that that's what the nurse told her. That I didn't feel that at all. Like, it was just something I had to do. I had to have this heated, vented airflow, and it didn't. I never felt any pain. I never felt any anxiety once I got the anxiety medicine. But it wasn't. My experience in the hospital was completely opposite of what I'm finding out or found out was what my family went through. And I've told people many times, and well, I'll save that for a little bit later. But to hear that stuff, and I don't, whether I was feeling that pain or not, I don't remember it. Like, and I believe honestly, maybe I was feeling it and feeling crummy, but the Lord spared me from that pain. Like, I do not remember ever feeling to the point where, like, I'm going to die. This is it. Like, I never ever had that thought. I never felt bad enough to where, like, this is absolutely horrible, except for one instance, which we'll get into down the road here. But I honestly believe God spared me and protected me from that, and honestly, just because of the prayers of the people.
So I remember at this time it had been for 24 hours that since he had texted me, and I just had written down, like, I need to hear from him. And he texted at that time that he had a really bad headache and he was feeling really crummy. And they said that was from the nitric. But At that time, the boys' quarantine was over the next day. And I remember Pastor Mike was like, bring them up here. Let's take them for some ice cream. They need to get out. He loved on them a little bit. Some other people from the church were there. I'm not sure who.
Travis.
But,
I don't remember.
You remember that,
I don't
Kate?
remember that.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Well,
remember.
on-
You don't remember
then-
much.
On Wednesday, another thing for us, like you said, God had constantly been sending us people, and like people we didn't even know would come up to us and talk about Dad. And we weren't really going to school or anywhere really.
When did I anyway?
But the night of the prior night, Dr. Wheeler was there, and he came up to us afterwards, and he was like, "Are you girls coming to class tomorrow?" And we were like, "Well, we weren't really planning on it." And he was like, "Well, I want you to go to class." So we came to class the next day, and he brought us up to the front and just told us how he was one of his good friends was in the hospital with COVID, and he was like, and that good friend's daughters are in this class. And so he brought us up to the front, and all the girls in the class came up and put their hands on us and prayed for him. Huge class.
Like
Students
300 people.
at Liberty prayed for him.
So 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday night, we had an update that there was no improvement today, but no decline. So we thought, we'll take it. I remember at that point kind of just feeling like it was a roller coaster because it would be worse, maybe a slight improvement, and then he just kind of sat there for a few days at 10:10 Wednesday, praying that Tim would get some relief, because at that time we were hearing that he was really tired and just kind of suffering, and that we just started praying that he would get some relief from that. And then that night, Mandy came over and we walked for a while and talked and prayed together, and we made another poster. I made another poster for him, and Sandy Hubbard came and picked it up, and she dropped it off at his room so that when he woke up the next morning, he would see that poster, because at that time you were just tired, and we were trying to get something to you so that you would get some more strength. So at 6:30 that morning, I just kind of journaled my feelings that, Tim's been my earthly rock, since I was 18, and this was a hard trial for me,
And now at 22, I'm.
And so it was just hard for me to go through something. To me, this was one of the hardest things I had gone through, and I was going through it without my husband and without him. And so that was hard. It was hard to not be with him while he was going through. I thought, here I'm struggling by myself, but he's struggling by himself as well. And so it was really hard to just not be with him at that time when he was so sick. So in that morning, because I was just feeling that way, the song came to my mind, More Like Jesus. And I remember I couldn't sleep because I kept thinking of that song. And that song had always been a hard song for me to sing. If more of you means less of me, take everything. And I remember we'd sing that on Sunday, and I'd always say, except for my husband and my kids. Like that was always my thing. I struggled to say that and to sing it, like literally, if more of you means less of me, take everything. And so that's all I kept singing, and that's all that was in my head that morning. I remember I woke up and I texted Wendy, and I was like, what's the name of that song? What's the name of that song that says for the Lord to just take everything? And so I just kept saying those words over and over. And so at that point I kind of was thinking, is this the Lord telling me he's going to take them? Because that's what was on my heart. And I just remember at that time, he just gave me such peace and such strength of no matter what happened, whichever way the Lord chose to heal him, it was going to be okay, because he was going to take care of us. I remember feeling overwhelmed with the love that was poured out on our family. We did not walk through this alone. Yes, we had the Lord, but the Lord provided literally hands and feet of Jesus. I can't tell you how much our whole family was loved on while he was
We've
gone.
been in ministry, all 22 years of marriage, and I've never experienced the church in the way that we experienced it through this time. The Big C Church, yes, Highland Heights was a part of that, but our church friends in Florida, I had people, college friends, reach out that I hadn't spoken to in years, and I've never experienced the church love me and my family like they did in this experience. It was overwhelming. It was incredible, and it was the church. I was extremely proud, extremely humble, extremely glad to be a part of the church, and it was amazing.
And then on Thursday at 10:30 a.m., we got an update that he just did not sleep well, had a really rough night. Then at 6:25 p.m., we got another update from the nurse that he just had a really rough day and had more setbacks. And he just kept saying it was too much when they tried to flip him over on his belly. So we started praying that God would make it easy that night. But that was a rough day and a rough night that he had on Thursday. And they actually had to increase his oxygen levels just a little bit more that day. So I remember thinking, oh, I thought we were going the right way. Now we're starting to go the wrong way again. At 10:30 p.m., I remember because I had gotten a bad update that morning and a bad update that night, I needed something. So I called the nurse again. And this nurse was different than any of the other nurses. And I remember she said, her words, and I wrote them down, was, "I've got him tonight. Go rest. I've got him." And she said, "Call me anytime you need to." And I remember that gave me comfort to know, like, someone's there. Like she said, "I've got him. I've got him." And so I remember I just kept thinking that.
Is that Mercy?
Not yet. And she said he was in better spirits than yesterday because she had had him the night before. And she said he was in better spirits than he was 24 hours ago. And that she said the night before he just kept saying, "I want to go home. I need to go home. I need to go home." And she said that night, he was actually realizing that he needed to be there. And so she said he was accepting that, okay, I need to be here. I'm going to embrace it. And so she said he was in better
Finally.
spirits.
Whatever.
So Friday, October 15th at 9:30, Tim texted me that morning and just said that his night sucked. She said he told me his drain pipe kept draining. I know I don't like to say that word, but I'm just telling you what he told me.
I was like,
And that, he texted,
Hey, it's a cannula, not a drain pipe.
that's what you texted me though.
I texted
so
a
just-
drain pipe.
You actually texted train pipe. Those are
Okay.
your exact pipes.
What?
Again, he had nitric, but the thing that he texted me exactly was train pipe kept draining. Back at it, new plan, here we go. And so even though his night stunk, he was like, "That's okay. We're going to get a new plan, and here we go." And he was just so positive. I remember his spirit was really good. But that day, the nurse, I really didn't hear much or didn't understand much. There was a language barrier, and
So wait a minute. So the cannula, obviously the thing you have wrapped around your ears, going into your nose and everything, a little bit wider than just a little hose, and it was heated airflow. So what would happen was it was heated, so the heat in the water and all would hit the cold air, and it would cause condensation. Well, this condensation was dripping on me, and it was, I remember, up my nose. I mean, it was just, it was brutal. So I would take off the cannula, and I would hang it off the side of my bed and just shake it. I'd shake all the condensation off. Well, I mean, that only took about 5, 6, 7 seconds. I would shake it off, and it was like Grand Central. The alarms would go off. Everybody'd come rushing in. "Well, what's going on? What's going on?" I'm over here just shaking off my cannula. "Mr. Tim, what are you doing?" I said, "This thing is bothering me." I said, "I'm done with it." I said, it drips on me." I said, "It's all on my face and stuff." Oh, it was brutal. All down my shirt and everything. I'd get wet and stuff. So finally, I would put it back on, and they would know, okay, after 2 or 3 hours when all the alarms would go off, he's probably just shaking off the cannula again.
Well, I don't remember what day it was or, whatever, but when Dad had that on, we were on FaceTime.
Yeah, he
together.
He would
FaceTimed us.
lift it up and put it on his forehead and then go,
Yes.
and Mom was like,
Put it on, Tim! But Mom would get out of the camera and like, he needs to put it on. Because he didn't want to yell at you.
And he was doing
sleeping.
it like
Every time we took it off.
he wasn't that long that
She
he
was
had it
like,
off,
"Oh,
but he
it's
would
fine."
do it so
Yeah.
slow.
Oh, it's
he'd like,
fine.
he'd do it
And then
like
he goes-
2 or 3 times every 5 minutes.
and then he'd bring it down real slow and get it all adjusted.
And Mom would just sit
Mom
there
was
like,
put it on.
And he was a little loopy from the
A
nitric.
little?
So, like, when you go to the dentist and they put the nitric, it's kind of similar to what they give you if you're going to get your teeth pulled or something. It kind of makes you loopy. It's called the fun gas, laughing gas. So that's what they had been giving
It
him.
wasn't really like that, though. I mean,
That's
it
how they
wasn't-
explained it to me.
Okay,
I don't know.
alright,
That's how
maybe.
the nurse explained it to me.
I felt good.
So he felt good, and I remember he kept talking about the pecan.
Yes, it's pecan.
So he thought it was so funny that he had a pecan.
Hey, we don't have to be talking about that on the video.
But he kept
Oh,
telling
I thought you were
Caden
talking
he was
about a
going to bring.
pecan. I was like,
He kept telling Caden
A
he was going to bring
pecan.
him one home. It was just funny because we were
Yeah.
laughing, thinking why. It was just
Next
different
Yeah.
because he was a
Oh,
little
goodness.
loopy.
Okay, moving
But-
right along.
when did I FaceTime him that day on the way back from
I
Yoder's
think
farm?
it was the same day, I think, that we were on FaceTime with him in Mom's office because you weren't there when the fireworks
We're sitting on
were.
the
Yeah, so is that at this time now? Or?
You can go ahead. I
Yeah,
don't know.
it is.
He was like doing a little bit better at this point, like FaceTiming us more, talking to us more, and so yeah, I didn't get to FaceTime him that morning. So I wanted to FaceTime him. I wanted to talk to him.
Oh, I think this is
So
later.
he was texting me, and he said, or I asked him, I said, "Can I FaceTime you?" And he said, "Yeah." So I was with my friend and her family, like her sister, her grandma, and her mom, and we were just riding in the car, and I was like, "Hey guys, I'm gonna FaceTime my dad real quick." So we got on FaceTime. And I will never forget this. It was hilarious. And he goes, "Well, Kelly, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, we just went to Yoder's farm. We're going back to go carve pumpkins." And he goes, "All right." He goes, "You better carve your best representation of me." Oh, I totally messed up the pumpkin. It didn't turn out right at all. And so, but anyway, so then he said, "Well, how are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm doing good, you know, blah, blah, blah." And told him what we were doing and stuff like that. And I just kept talking, and then I was done talking, and he looks at me, and he just kind of looks at me for a second. And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Well, ask me how I'm doing." And I said, "Dad, I know how you're doing." He goes, "It would be nice to be asked."
Right.
It was just so funny. Ask me how I'm
And
doing.
it was comments like that, like all the time
Yeah.
on the phone, that he
And
didn't
then-
really know.
And then I started laughing because it was priceless. It was just really funny. And he gets all self-conscious and mad. "Don't laugh at me!
Laughing at me.
Are you laughing at me?" And I was like, "No, Dad."
Oh, brother.
So then I had Friday, October 15th, the doctor called at 8:30 p.m. Doctor finally called, and he said that Tim had held steady all day. There was no change, that he was still getting an enormous amount of oxygen. Again, Becky was on all the phone calls from the doctors and nurses. We would always do speaker, and she would talk all the doctor stuff to him and talk about all the numbers. There was so much. I have to say there was so much we were watching as far as medication. We haven't really talked about that, but we had fought for like high doses of vitamins for him, things that we and Becky had read that was going to help him. And so I remember we had to fight really hard for the treatment that we wanted while he was there. And Becky was a huge part of that. She did that for us. So at this point on Friday, 8:30 p.m., he was on still 65%, 45 liters with as much nitrate as he could handle. And the day before, he was at 75%. So there was a small improvement, and we were happy about that. Tim said that I remember that day was a really rough day. They were understaffed, they were short-staffed that day, and he just had a really rough day. We won't share all the details about that, but it was rough. And so this is the day that the lady answered the phone. When I called for an update, the lady that answered the phone was like, "Hey, we're struggling with the patient right now. The patient's not doing well. We can't talk. Everyone's trying to save this patient." And so I remember Becky and I just getting on our knees and just praying that it wasn't him, because we didn't know what patient it was and they didn't know who we called for. And so we were just praying that it wasn't Tim that they were working on. We found out, well, we'll talk about that later too. But I just remember the nurse told me that he was exhausted, but he was critical but stable. And I remember we thought, we'll take it. He's stable, we'll take it. And we were praying that he was going to start moving in the right direction at that time. And I just wrote down that it was an emotional roller coaster. I just felt like it was, one step back, one step forward, two steps back, kind of back and forth. Saturday, October 16th at 9:30 a.m. Our update was after being stable on 45 liters of oxygen for a few days that they had to bump him up to, at this point, 55 liters at 75%. Again, they said critical but stable. So he Instead of getting a little better, he got just a little worse. But I remember anytime he got a little worse, I would think, is he just going to keep getting worse?
It's still coming down. I mean, I
Still
used to
coming
was
down.
at 100% in 65, so now I was dropping down. But yeah, back and hovering back and forth a little bit.
And then on Sunday, the 17th at 8:30 a.m., Tim texted that he was getting better, slowly bringing all the levels down. And I remember that morning, we had finally, because we were not in quarantine, and we had decided that we were going to go to church that morning. And so I went downstairs to wake up the girls, and I found out that Kelly had got in a wreck that night.
I forgot about that.
And she had totaled her car and flipped and landed in a ditch.
So, I was leaving, and there was like it was 45 on the road, like the speed limit was 45. And for once, I actually wasn't speeding. I was actually going about 45, 50. But around the turn, it's like, there's like what's it called? The sign's yellow.
I don't know.
Eagles
Uh,
or deer crossing.
No, it's
Anyway.
it's a suggested
Slow
speed.
down.
A suggested speed of slowing down. And so I just didn't, like I slowed down a little bit. I just didn't slow down as much as I should have to go around the turn. And so I went in I went over to the other lane, and then when I came around the turn, I had already hit 3 deer this year. I came around the turn, and there was a deer in the lane. And in my head, I was thinking, Dad had just fixed my car, like $1,000 worth of money on my car. And so, like, just fixed it. And I was like, Dad has to pay all these hospital bills. Like, we've got to worry about all this. And I was like, Dad doesn't need to be worrying about this right now. I cannot hit another deer. So I
You
swerved.
thought all of that in 10 seconds?
well, no. What I was thinking was, I don't have money to hit another deer. So, so I swerved the deer, which I never do. I'm really good at hitting them. So when I did, I like overcorrected, and I guess, I don't know, like I guess it just was too much. Like I turned too much, and so my car rolled and landed. It wasn't like a ditch, but it was like the ground went down a little bit. But luckily there was a hill on that side of the road, and my car hit the hill, and that's how it stopped rolling. And I remember it stopped sideways up like this, and I don't remember like unbuckling or anything like that. I just like remember the driver's side was up in the air, the passenger side was on the ground, and I remember I like not woke up, but like realized where I was, and I was sitting on the grass and like the gravel of the road, the side of the road, from inside my car. Like my windows were busted, and I was sitting on the grass from inside my car. And so it was actually pretty funny, since I'm so short and my car was up sideways, I could stand up in it. So I stood up on the ground, and one of my friends was driving behind me, and so tried to get me out and just couldn't get the doors open because they were so heavy. So this random dude from across the street came out of his house, because he said that he heard the crash. So he comes out, and he could not get the front seat door open, so he goes to the back side door, and he gets that one open. So I crawl to the back seat and then get out, and this guy, oh my word, it was really tall off the ground, so like I couldn't just put my leg out and touch the ground. He thought I was going to fall out of the car. So he let go of the door that he was holding up to grab me. So then the door slammed on my leg. But anyway, I got out and I went to go sit on the other side of the road. And I remember, like, I looked at my car, and then, like, I remember I was sitting crisscross applesauce on the grass, and I remember looking at my arms and everything, and, like, I had, like, glass in my hair, like, I was hanging from my seatbelt and watched my windshield shatter. Like, that was one of the only things I remembered from rolling. Like, I watched my windshield shatter. I was not bleeding in any spot. Like, I had no scratches on me. I had a bruise on my elbow and my bottom, and then this side, and then from landing, landing when I hit the ground, I guess. And I just remember, like, I don't know, I had no scratches, no nothing, and I was completely fine. And so then I called my friend who owns a tow truck company. He came, and
At that point, you're probably thinking you should have hit the deer.
no duh. And so then the ambulance came, and I actually I was freaking out that I needed my phone and my wallet. I was like, I don't care about anything else in my car. I need my phone, I need my wallet. And so my friend Cameron, the one with the tow truck company, he was like, well, I'll go get it. I was like, no, you don't know where it is. You don't know what it looks like. I'll go in and get it. So we open up the door again, and I crawl back inside the car to get my phone and my wallet, and I get it, and I crawl back out. I had just crawled back out. The ambulance shows up, and they were like, so who was in the accident? And I said, I was, and he looks me up and down, and he goes, you? And I said, yes, sir. And he goes, does your head hurt? Does anything hurt? And I remember so clearly, I looked at my arms. He probably thought I was like, I don't know what was wrong for me, but I looked at my arms, and I was like, I don't even have a scratch on me. I was like, I'm fine. And I just couldn't believe it. Like, I was literally fine. But I did go home, and I didn't sleep because I was like so paranoid that I was like bleeding internally or something.
Yeah, and I didn't know.
But yeah, I didn't want to tell Mom because I was like, I didn't want to wake her up. She hadn't gotten any sleep recently, so I didn't want to wake her up. I thought they would be so mad at me. And we woke up the next morning, and they were not mad at me at all. They were just glad that I was okay.
Yeah, so I just remember I was waking them up. We were going to go to church and just hearing about
Kayla
that.
told Mom.
And I said, well, are you sure? Is the car okay? And she's like, no, it's totaled. And I'm like,
Oh yeah,
Are
this
you
is when they were on
sure?
the phone with
I
Dad.
just remember saying, are you sure? And she was like, yeah, I'm sure. And I said, well, how do you know it's total? She was like, Mom, it's totaled. And
I think I
then-
had left the room at that
And
point because it was
showed her
stressing me out.
pictures.
So then we saw the
So, yeah,
pictures.
let's keep on rolling.
And
I
anyway,
wasn't
so we
even
were.
there. I was at Busch Gardens.
Yes, Tim.
That's
I
right.
woke
That's
up and
right.
saw
You
that.
were, yeah.
I don't even know where I was.
So this is kind of where things wind down. I didn't write as much, but I just have Sunday at 8:30 a.m. That's when we found out about Kelly's wreck, and that Tim texted that.
I do remember you texting me that. I remember
Yes,
that
she
now.
called and told
Yeah.
you. That he was getting better slowly. They were starting to bring all of his numbers down, and that they wanted to try to get him moving more. I remember we texted that night. He was more coherent, and he started texting me through the night. I remember we stayed up all night texting. Neither one of us slept that night, and neither one of us were really sleeping anyway. But the doctor said he had told me that night that the doctor told him, when you first got here, I wasn't so sure that you were going to make it. He said, but now looking at you, I think you're going to make it. I think you're going to be okay. And then Sunday, October 17th at 12:30 p.m., we got a great nurse report that he was on 40 liters and 60% oxygen, sitting in a chair. I will never forget this. She told me, she said he was sitting in a chair, watching church, eating lunch, and praising the Lord. And so she said he's sitting up, eating his lunch in the chair, watching church, and praising God. And we just thought, oh my goodness, he had been laying in the bed for so long, and now he's sitting up in a chair, eating lunch, which was huge that he was eating, watching church and praising God. And we thought that was so amazing. And his nurse's name was Mercy. And so,
Yeah, I thought that happened earlier in the week. Clearly, I was not clear
Yeah.
on the details. But I thought for sure Mercy came into the picture a lot sooner. Regardless, whenever she came into the picture, she came into the picture when I needed her to come in the picture. And I just, for me, I thought it was after Tuesday night, that night of prayer. And I remember vividly, distinctly, like for me, I know, what Trisha's account of what the nurses were telling her and so forth, so on. But I remember specifically that Jesus was in that room with me. It wasn't like, yes, I'm a Christian, I'm a believer, and I put my faith in him and he is with me. It was, he was in the room and sat on that bed. There was no shape of a person or anything like that. I just remember his presence, like Trish had prayed. His presence was so overwhelming that it was undeniable. And I just remember it. I just remember feeling, I'm going to be fine. I don't know what's going to happen or any of that. All of what the doctors were saying. But for me, it was, all right, let's get our oxygen down. Here's the next goal. I remember telling the doctor all the time, what's the next goal? What's the next goal? We're down to 55. All right, let's get down. The goal today is 50. Let's get down to 50. And I just remember the presence of God was extremely, extremely heavy in that room. And there was no fear. There was no doubt. There was no concern. It was just, all right, here's our goal, and let's get after it. But that morning, I do remember that morning. And I'm picturing it right now, all right? I got up. I was always sitting up in the bed. I never really laid down. I was always sitting, or I would lay on my side. But I remember waking up that morning, and I would look at the board on the wall, and they would have like, all the different, what medications or whatever, when my breakfast time was, who my doctor was, and right at the very bottom, the nurse was Mercy. I thought, you got to be kidding me! Like, if that's not a sign from the Lord, I don't know what is. And that was just more, encouragement, more confidence for me that everything was going to be fine, and He was showing me mercy, and it was just incredible. And she was incredible. I remember, she was the one that brought in the FaceTime.
She was the only one that would bring in. She would bring the laptop from the hospital in, and she would just call. She would just FaceTime and say, "Hey, your family's on the phone."
Yeah.
But that was Sunday morning, and then the doctor called at 3:15 that afternoon and just said that his X-ray, that he wasn't tolerating the lowered oxygen as well as they thought and or hoped, and that they had new X-rays that showed more infiltrates on his lung, on both sides of his lungs, and he was telling me that Tim's lungs were actually worse, and then that his white blood cell count was up, and that they were watching for another infection. And so...
When did I get pneumonia? Because I had pneumonia, or was it just always COVID
Always
pneumonia?
when you went in.
Okay.
Day one. So I remember thinking at that point, we had just gotten what we thought was a great report, and here we are saying, now we're going to have to start watching for another infection, which we knew things like that would come, and we were watching for that. Becky had all the right questions to ask and things to do, so she kind of took care of all of that for us. And I just have on here in all caps, roller coaster, because that's kind of how I felt my emotions were. So, but
Well, they had me on 5 days or 5 whatever treatment of remdesivir. They had me on that, and of course, then one of the issues with remdesivir is your kidneys. It starts attacking your kidneys pretty well. So they were watching that, and then here this was going back up. Kidneys were so.
at 4.
I remember that Sunday, Mom texted that that Dad's nurse was named Mercy, and I showed Pastor Josh, and then he took my phone, screenshotted it, and sent it to himself.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool.
Let's see. And then at 4 p.m., Mercy brought in I didn't even know who was going to call. Normally I initiated everything, but Mercy went and got the iPad from the hospital and FaceTimed, and we all FaceTimed, and I just have in here that, and I remember that phone call, that Tim preached a sermon to the kids and myself, and y'all remember that?
Yeah.
And he was like, I have quotes kind of written down what he had said, that God has a reason for this. It was a good thing, that God was working in his life, and that this wasn't anyone's fault. God wasn't punishing for anything. He was just really reassuring the kids, there's a reason for this, and that God had a plan. He told them to start looking at some of the posts that had been put on Facebook, and that I just remember he was speaking truth to myself and the kids like I had never seen. He was just...
It must have been that morning that Mom, she ran downstairs. He's posting worship songs.
Yeah.
That was earlier.
He's posting
Mandy's the one
worship
that texted
songs.
me. Was like, "Have you seen Facebook? Tim is on Facebook posting praise and worship songs." And I was like, "What?" But so then that night, 6:30 that night, his oxygen levels were kind of the same. But I remember he was doing better because he called me and was like, "I really want 2 things." And I was like, "You can have anything you want." And he said, "I want Chick-fil-A." And he said, "I want my razor." He was just feeling so
man.
nasty because he was so shaved and
And
so
they wouldn't.
scruffy.
Didn't I have my
You had one, but it
battery?
wasn't.
Yeah,
it
it
wasn't
didn't
working
work.
because it was so thick.
And they wouldn't do anything. They wouldn't let me shave because I was taking blood thinners to prevent clots. So they were scared to death of me shaving in case I cut myself.
And every time he moved, he had to be careful not to move because when he moved, it knocked his levels down. It was taking everything he could just to breathe. So.
Yeah.
Well, he had
Um,
FaceTimed us. Do you remember this? And he answered it might have been when Mercy called us. And he answered the FaceTime call and he said, "Hey, I'm looking good." And his whole face was just covered with hair.
Man.
Yep. So Wendy came over and I was. She was like, "Let's go." So she went with me, and we stopped and got him Chick-fil-A. We brought his razor to him, and Carrie had dropped off chocolate chip pumpkin muffins. And I knew he would love those, and even though I wanted them, I put them all in the bag for him. And that's what he kept talking about. He said, when I
Pounded
get
those
back, I
things,
want
man.
some
They
more
were so good.
muffins.
Yeah.
So I didn't know at that point what he could eat, but I knew how to get back to the unit. So Wendy and I went up to the unit, and we asked if a nurse could step out. A nurse stepped out because I wanted to get an update while I was there. Came and updated us, and I said, hey, here's Tim's food. I don't know if he's allowed to have this Chick-fil-A and pumpkin muffin, so if he's not, you can eat it. And he was like, no, he can have it, he can have it. So brought that back, and then Wendy and I got to stand outside of his doors and pray. So that was neat that we got to pray right outside of his doors again. Then I have Tuesday at 8:30 a.m. We FaceTimed him again, and I remember thinking he was really looking better. Now, he had shaved as well. They actually came in and helped him shave, and he was feeling better. And I remember them telling them their goal at that day was to move him to a new room. So he was moving out of COVID ICU back to PCU. So PICU, or PCU, I'm not sure exactly.
PC, progressive care.
So PCU. So they're moving out of ICU to PCU. So I just had very slow improvement is what the doctor said last night, and I have written, I'll take it, I'll claim it. So there were some different things that were going on with his body that we were watching. 12:30 p.m. the nurse called me and told me that they had moved him this was huge, they had moved him from heated high flow to just one step down of a different kind of oxygen. So, and at 1:30 that day, they moved him to PCU. And I remember that's when he got in PCU, that's when we kind of realized, they told us that almost all patients do not move from COVID ICU back to COVID PCU. While he was in the hospital, there were 12 people in COVID ICU, and all of them passed away except for Tim. And every day that he was in COVID ICU, someone died. At least one person died, except for him. And I remember them being amazed that he made it back to PCU, and we knew it was the Lord's work and the Lord's healing in his life.
I remember going over that Tuesday. They were wheeling me into the PCU, and the nurse that was in there looked at me kind of shocked and kind of squinted and looked at me again. She said, "You're back?" And it wasn't like, "Oh, you're back, this is great." It was like, "You're back," as in, how did you get back? And that's when I found out that, yeah, everybody that had gone into the ICU from the PCU never made it back. I was the only one.
So they were trying things Thursday, 11 a.m. They were trying different things to get all the fluid off of his lungs. He FaceTimed us again because he really wanted us to start praying for Rebecca and Matt, which I guess were some nurses that he was there. Again, his oxygen levels were dropping, and I remember at that time they said maybe he could come home Monday or Tuesday. And then that's kind of where I stopped journaling. I didn't write anymore after that.
And that was on that Thursday? Yeah. That was, yeah.
So Friday at
That
10, I said Friday at 10:43 a.m. is what I have written down, that they have to get you down to 5 liters of oxygen in order for you to go home, and that maybe you could go home Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah. And that's ultimately what happened. I came home on 6 liters, and the doctor that was a compromise. And that was that following Tuesday. He said, you can go home, one of two things. You can go home on 6 liters of oxygen, because I was begging at this point. I'm like, I'm going to do better at home. I'm going to get better quicker, so forth, so on. He said, all right, you can either stay in here until you're completely off the oxygen, or you can go home on 6 liters. I said, 6 liters it is. I said, what do I got to do? I said, just let me know. Let's get this done. And he was gracious enough to let me go home on the 6 liters. Of course, I had different physical therapists come in and help me walk. It was a struggle to walk 10 feet and back without my oxygen dropping into the 70s. Low 80s, sometimes the 70s. So there was that, just going through all of that almost every day in the PCU. And I just remember just thinking about and going through all the texts. I mean, it was crazy, the amount of texts and messages that were coming in and phone calls and everything. And the sense of being just overwhelmed by the presence of God, but also people praying for me and for my family and taking care of us. I mean, learning about things after the fact. We had people coming to cut the grass. We had people bringing food. We had people taking the boys. It was just overwhelming the way we were taken care of. And there's nothing we could ever do or ever say that could ever adequately thank everybody for what you all did. We're grateful and unbelievably grateful at the way you surrounded us, just in prayer, but let alone everything else that the church and our friends and family did. So thank you for all that. It was a tremendous journey. And what I was going to say earlier, people have asked, all of this, that, and the other, and what was it like, and so forth, so on. My experience was a completely different experience in the hospital. I didn't experience any of the pain, like I said earlier. I didn't experience any of that. Maybe struggled a little bit, but my experience was, I'll say, relatively good compared to what Trish's notes and everything like that. And I've told people again, I said, if I were given the option to go through it again, to experience God's goodness and closeness the way I did, I would do it again. And I know my family probably like, time out, let's not go there. But to experience his presence the way I did in the hospital, I would go through it again. It was incredible for me. It was life-changing for me. And not just his physical presence with me, or his presence being there in that room with me, but the presence of the church and him working through people the way he did. I will never forget that. I will never forget it. And if it meant going through something like that again, just to experience him the way I did, I would do it in a heartbeat. And I remember I think that it might have been the day with Mercy, I don't 100% know, but I remember his presence being so thick on me. There was nothing else that mattered when I was in that room than to share the gospel. I remember praying for Matt, for Rebecca, for the doctor, for everyone. I remember texting Trish. I shared the gospel with 4 people today. I had a captive audience. They had to come to me. So I was like, man, I was on fire. And I loved talking about Jesus in that room. And I was bold and I was encouraged. And I was just going to share about him, period. And I remember getting out of the hospital, and I remember that Tuesday night when I got home, and we were talking and everything, and Wednesday, Thursday, Friday morning, I remember waking up, and I don't know if you remember this or not, I looked at you and I said, he's gone. I remember. And it's not that he had left me. I know I'm secure in my salvation. I know he loves me, and he's with me all the time. But I knew at that point, the presence the way it was on me, he had left. And immediately after I said that and felt that, he told me, he goes, you're going to be okay. He said, I'm always with you. But he said, I've got you to this point because of the prayers of the people. I answered them. I heard them and I answered them. And he said to me, if you want to get that close again, it's up to you. And I'll never forget that Friday morning of just feeling that desperation of that loss of being that close to him, but also knowing it's still just as possible to be that close to him again. But now it was up to me. He came to me in my time of need and surrounded me and took care of me. But at this point now, he's like, I've got you here. Now you need to pursue me. And the word tells us when we seek him and seek him with all our heart, we will find him. And so it was an incredible journey. And I can't imagine what you all went through. Of course, hearing all of this and knowing a little bit of what you went through. And Trish was amazing, just phenomenal. And Becky, with all her nursing expertise.